Welcome to the Voicehacks Podcast. I'm your host, Mary Z. On the Voicehacks Podcast, I'll be talking to some of rock and metal's best singers, coaches, and experts about what goes into the mysterious and amazing sounds we make with our voices. If you like this podcast, please help spread the word by sharing it with your friends. Post our episodes on your Facebook and Instagram, and tag me and my guests. I'm at MetalMaryZ on Instagram. Don't forget to leave the show a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, and of course, follow me on YouTube at Voicehacks by Mary Z. Let's get into it. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Voicehacks Podcast. It is my absolute pleasure to have on the show today Tim and Xen, the dual vocal team of Ne Obliviscaris from Australia. Thank you guys so much for meeting me today and for being on the podcast.
No problem at all. It's a pleasure. It's been quite a few years since we've actually crossed paths.
Yes, I briefly saw you guys when you guys were just briefly coming through Vegas. And I'm so sad because the tour you have coming up in October is not coming through Vegas. So
it's always one of those challenges trying to fit in everything and get to everywhere. But I think that's why we hope to keep coming back each time, obviously mix things up. And it's exciting to be here and have that new record on the horizon and finally some tours after a long time without any.
Things have changed a lot for you guys over the last few years. When is the last time that you did any touring?
It was I think we did a couple of festivals in June 2019.
I remember that I landed back in Australia on July 1, 2019, after that European festival tour. And we were supposed to come home for about 12 months to do the new record. And then that's now 3.5 years ago. And so it's been a while.
That's crazy to me. I like thinking back at how long this is. That's kind of insane to me. How difficult is it for you to, you have this North American tour coming up in October. How difficult is it for you to orchestrate something like that, even now, after all this time? Certainly more difficult than last year, but does it still pose any difficulties for you guys to get that off the ground?
Yeah, so I guess the challenges at the moment with kind of post-pandemic is, I guess it's getting kind of back up to speed on everything because some things are different now than they were, but a lot of it is just money. And so everything's gone up in price, everything's more expensive. It's more expensive to book, buses and flights, and visas are taking like way longer than usual for the US and all that sort of stuff. And so what we're finding is, having to be, we always try and be organized, but we're having to try to treat everything as urgent, even when the tour is in October, because, everything just takes a lot longer, and just trying to work out how to make sure all the upfront costs of everything that we can pay for it all. And because we've been sitting at home, there obviously hasn't been that normal turnover of money coming in for certain areas of the band. And so, so it's definitely been a big challenge. And even just with gear, we have all this great live gear, but it's been sitting there for a long time, and testing it all out and double checking what's still working and what needs repairs, what we need to get new stuff of, really kind of reevaluating everything about the live show and how we tour, as if we were a new band, really, just kind of reviewing every element from scratch, make sure that we've got it all covered, and that we can come back, at a higher level than what we did before, because that's obviously the intention every time we do a new album, to kind of see if we can step things up a bit.
Yeah, I mean, 3.5 years is an incredibly long time to go. I mean, your lives have probably changed dramatically just personally. You guys really stand out in my mind because you were one of the bands, the very first bands in metal to do Patreon and to have a successful crowdfunding, kind of the pioneers of that. How has your business model changed since that time till now?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, I guess during the pandemic, it changed as far as that half the money or more disappeared, and everyone had to go get more work doing other things because
disappeared. Like, did you guys lose subscribers or something because of the pandemic? Or
Well, I mean, over time, we were actually amazed at how high it managed to stay. Like we averaged probably like 8 to 10,000 a month in US dollars in subscribers, probably on the Earn album cycle, and I think the lowest it got down to was maybe like just under 5,000 US a month. So that's like still a decent amount.
That's great.
And it was a very, very slow decline over that couple of years. And then now, as soon as we put out some new material, now it's been starting to go back up again since then. But I guess the other thing was that where the model changed a little bit was in 2016. So like 2014, we did the World Tour crowdfunding campaign, which was broke an Australian record at the time for the biggest for a music act in Australia. And then we were the first to use Patreon to try to fund a band's career in the whole world in March 2016. The difference where things went over time was that we started to make some money from tours. In 2016, we were losing like in US dollars, 10 to 20,000 US from every single tour. And so Patreon was the only way of not just trying to pay ourselves something, but of funding our losses. Whereas by the end of the Earn album cycle, we were actually making, small profits on the tours that we were doing, which meant that the Patreon money was mostly going towards paying for us like as a wage, so that we could do the band like as a job, as a profession. But then we were also adding in different things from royalties and tours, and all of it was getting added together. Whereas, of course, when all the tour stuff dried up, then some of that income disappeared. But then also we had no way to kind of engage people. And it was a very awkward time to say, like, hey, support us on Patreon. Everyone's losing their jobs. It's a pandemic. People are dying. Give our band money. Like, we didn't want to do that. Yes. And so we kind of just were pretty quiet on that for a couple of years until we finally finished this new album, and we'd say, hey, okay, now's the time. Thanks for sticking with us, as many of you that did. And then let's keep going on from there. But I guess the difference is now, that element of, instead of solely relying on Patreon, which it was like the only way we survived in 2016.
It's
now
amazing,
it's using those traditional revenue elements in addition to Patreon, and combining them all to support the band's ability to survive and function.
This is really fascinating because now I see what you mean by the half that disappeared came from your live performances.
Yeah, I mean, there were, not only, we were struggling, but at the same time, over the pandemic, people lost jobs. They couldn't, it is that kind of, you got to work out, okay, how much do we promote this? How much do we put into things, or how can we provide content? And it was just, such an awkward time, not only for us, but I mean, we as a band were probably a lot more lucky than a lot of other bands. We had at least something to help us continue, whereas a lot of other bands, some may have folded, and some, put everything on hiatus for however long. And but at the end of the day, it's we're still quite overwhelmed at how many people kind of stuck by us through that time. But we're trying to make up for the lost time now that we've started our, I guess, album cycle.
Yes, because you really came back out with a bang here. Your first single, and it comes with an absolutely gorgeous 12-minute video, but it's actually a 12-minute video that I did not get bored watching for a single second. It is, I mean, it ties together, it makes sense, visually, you know what I mean? And there are a lot of times where like, metal, 12 minutes, but this is like almost like a film. The song we're talking about is Equus. And you are talking a lot conceptually about the horrible bushfires that you all endured in Australia as well. On top of the pandemic, you had a terrible environmental climate change related disaster, and you felt very strongly about that and put that into your art. So talk to me a little bit about how that climate disaster affected you guys personally, and how it led to the production of this very epic piece that you came out with.
I think because the bushfires happened in late 2019, early 2020, so just prior to the actual pandemic hysteria, which was, I guess, around March of 2020.
Yes.
And so this was all prior to that. And so, Australia was going through such a panic, I guess, to some extent, millions of if not billions of animals died, displaced, people died. And so, well, the feeling behind the song was there, and the music was written prior to all this. And I cover a lot of global kind of issues in some of my stuff. It doesn't necessarily need to be a main focus, but then kind of channeling a lot of those thoughts into the emotion that a song portrays. So a lot of our music may be created first, and then I kind of work out, ultimately, how does this make me feel? And I just discuss with Tim as to, what his vibe on the song is and what sort of emotion something is portraying. However, Tim and I kind of perhaps need to talk about some of that stuff because we are completely different people and we kind of communicate on different levels, so to speak. And, some things may not make sense to him as they do to me. So we kind of have to explain ourselves. I generally have a darker perspective on things. So
this sort of matches what you both embody in the visual of the band as well. You have and also vocally, right? Certainly you have the distorted vocals versus the clean vocals. And that was going to be something I was going to ask you about. And I'm glad you brought it up, is how does a dual vocal team work all of that out at the end of the day, composing together?
You know what? I think we work it out really well because it's a lot of fun working with Xen. Fun isn't the word or a word that he would use very often, but I guess that goes to another example of our differences.
It's not in my dictionary.
But basically, Xen and I have worked together for 19 and a half years now with this band.
Yeah.
That's from when I joined. And, it's been a great working relationship for a really long time where we always had the same vision in regards to wanting to create the best thing possible, and we're both really passionate about that and really trying to do it at the highest level possible. And we've always been like that, even when we were just a rubbish local band and we really weren't very good for quite a few years. It took us a long time, but we always had these aspirations just to be the absolute best band that we possibly could be, even at the same time when we thought that we would never get very popular because we were kind of creating weird music. When we're writing, it's really just about communication. So, there might be a demo for a song and, we will spend some time often immediately, sending an email or some text messages back and forth, say, hey, I've got some ideas for 237 and 323 and these parts, and just getting a bit of an initial perspective on where each of us has ideas. And then we try to work out if any of them work together or if they work against each other and we have to choose. We're often coordinating not just our vocals, but also the violin as well, because sometimes there's sections where you could put any three of them. And then sometimes it's then also coordinating in the guitar solos, because it might be, okay, here's a section that could use melody. You're going to put a guitar solo, a violin melody, clean vocals. And then sometimes, we're never adverse to doing two things at the same time. That was something where on Portal of Eye, it was kind of accidental back in the day where we would write without communication. In those early days, we would just come up with ideas. And I remember with Portal of Eye, or sometimes, it'd be, we'd turn up to rehearsal and, oh, hey, we both have ideas for that. And we would just try it out. And I remember in the studio, even maybe for Portal of Eye, or maybe even for Citadel as well, I think there were moments where, we turned up and it's like, oh, you're singing there? I've got an idea to sing there as well, and we would just try it out instead of being like, oh, no, I'm going to sing there or we have to choose. It was like, hey, let's see how it sounds together. And I think that's one thing that's maybe less common that we do quite a bit, which is that element of joining the vocals together. There's a lot of bits where Xen's got his vocals happening at the same time as my violin. I might have a violin solo and his stuff happen at the same time. There's times where we sing at the same time, and there's other times where we coordinate going back and forth. But we do work together quite closely on a lot of that. And really, there's no decisions made on where the violin vocals of both types happen without us talking together. So I would say that, like, in amongst the band, once that initial part of the song is written, it's kind of Xen and I that work the closest and collaborate the most. Whereas say, Martino might be left to his devices to basically write his bass parts and then send them through for us to check out. Whereas Xen and I will be more, I'll be sending him vocal ideas like, hey, I've got a melody for this. What do you think? Do you think that suits that section? And, Xen was talking about the different way we might interpret things and emotions. And it's often about, I might have a particular melodic idea and then I might feel a particular energy with it, or maybe it might feel, for want of a better description, it might feel like happy or joyous. And then, Xen's lyrical concept is a bit darker. And so it's like, okay, well, do we adjust the lyrical concept? Do we adjust the melody? We got to make sure that they somewhat match. But that's really just, like I said, that back and forth and us being together linked through that entire process.
Yeah, I think what makes us work well, despite being somewhat completely opposite in a lot of ways, is just our ability to see a bigger picture. We have a goal that we want to achieve or to get to, and it also comes down to ultimately not being attached to anything in terms of when we write. So we can come up with all these ideas, but if you're too attached to things, then there's such a negative, almost a negative sense from that. So we go into it writing that, okay, these are our ideas, and what do you think? We can go either way. It's not an issue if something gets canned because it's a collaborative process, and it's for the greater cause.
I was just saying, just quickly on that as well, that also goes to how often we do stuff, because sometimes it'll be like there might be a great idea. It's like, hey Xen, this is an instrumental section for like 5 minutes, and never do you hear Xen be like, oh, like, what am I supposed to do, or whatever. Do you know what I mean? Like there's not
a complaint.
Yeah, well, it's because it's not about any one individual. It's about, is this good music? And if you send through an idea and it's agreed that this is good, then nothing else is really discussed about, oh, hey, we haven't done this in a while, or there's not enough violin in this song. And that's why you hear with the clean vocals that sometimes there's a lot of clean vocals in a song, and sometimes there's almost none, because it just depends on how it feels, it depends on how it comes out. And the same with different instrumental bits. If I get on a roll with something like we did maybe with Misericord 2, where there's a long instrumental section, it's like kind of working out, okay, well, what fits and where works to bring in the heavy vocals, but at the same time not forcing it. And we even did kind of the opposite of what we have often did in the past, where say in Graal, I remember Xen and I, we were talking about this, of his big moment of his vocals finishing are about the 5.5 minute mark, and Xen doesn't come back in again for the last 3 minutes of the song. Whereas normally there's often a few big screams at the end, and it was like, oh, well, does it need it though? And I remember Xen and I having that discussion, and I think it was even Xen's idea to be like, no, like let's just do it as it is, because this works musically.
Generally, and I don't want to get necessarily stuck into a pattern. I mean, obviously each song can be appreciated for what it is and listened separately, and you should do what's ultimately best for the song, for people to listen to it as an individual song. But in this case, it was kind of like the music is, I have a moment, minutes before it ends, but the music keeps the intensity, the build up, everything keeps going, and adding me to it, maybe perhaps would have made it as intense, but also different. But at the same time, I think the music in itself ultimately speaks for itself for what it is and how it came out. So it's, I don't think we're not necessarily too conscious about repeating ourselves with certain things, but I think, there's that sense of, I think Tim and I share in a way of like what's important in this part, I guess.
It sounds like the two of you are also somewhat divorced from You make a really good point about sort of being separated from your personal attachment to your idea, which I think is a level of maturity that a musician has to evolve to. Because I think when we're younger, we're a lot more like, this is my part, or whatever. But it's but this is why you've been able to work together for 20 years about, and it's not magic. It comes with, you mentioned a lot of like explaining yourselves to each other, and that you have to communicate very clearly to get your points across. And I love that you mentioned the melodic counterpoint of your other instruments, because I do feel like a lead guitar especially, but in your case in the band, which has a very unique addition, the violin is a very vocal sounding element. It almost carries singable vocal melodies, and that will overlap and interplay with the things you're doing vocally. It's interesting to hear you talk about that you have to make that a consideration as well.
Yeah, I think that there's all the different types of roles that we have in the band. So we have, I guess, 7 primary instruments as far as that. There's the 6 members plus me on the 2 instruments, violin and vocals. But beyond that, there's a couple different viola solo parts on this record. Within the violin, there's pretty acoustic violin parts. There's distorted violin parts. There's violin parts that are leads. There's solos. There's rhythmic violin parts. There's violin sections. There's string quartet sections with viola and cello added. So there's a lot of different types of ways that we can bring that melody across. And so it's then thinking about what type of melody serves the song most, mixed with what type of texture or timbre that we want to add in at those particular moments. And then trying to mix that up so there's that flow. And that's where I think that it's easy to not get too attached to things. Xen and I, we get featured plenty in the band, we're not deprived of getting to do our thing. We both get a chance to be ourselves in the music. And that makes it pretty easy, especially over the years, to feel comfortable that, okay, I had a good idea here, but that doesn't work because there's another idea there already. But then on the other hand, sometimes what happens which is like with Graal, is that we have a bunch of ideas, and so the sections just get made longer. And so that was what happened with Graal, where I remember Martino actually wrote the guitar riff for that 7/4 ending section, and he sent it through, and straight away I was like, I have so many ideas for this. I have vocal ideas, I have violin ideas. It's going to be so cool. And within 2 days, Benji sent through this epic guitar solo, and it used up the whole section. And I remember thinking, well, shit, we're just going to have to extend the section because there's so many good ideas for this riff. You can't just do that guitar solo to be done, because there's just so much you could do with that riff. So in the end, the riff goes for 3 minutes or something like that, because there were just so many ideas. Now, not every riff works to just repeat it for that amount of time. But, that is something we're very open to doing. You don't just have to do a riff a couple times and move on. But if you're going to extend it, obviously there's got to be particular flow. It has to build up. And that's where, with that ending riff of Graal, it is this very, very set development where you can hear, every 4 repetitions, the kicks are changing, and then there's going to this rhythm, and then this rhythm, and then the guitar goes from this to that, and then there's the strings, and then the violins, and then everything kind of built and progresses in a very specific designed fashion. And so I think that's the catch with all of our stuff, because there are so many choices with the instrumentation. It does have to be highly coordinated to make sure it all makes sense. Even another example is in Equus, the guitar solo that Benji added in. Originally we were talking about a guitar solo, and what got put forward worked in a particular part, which was this kind of tapping bit, which is just kind of when the choir comes in the latter part of that song. Whereas the big guitar solo that happens about 9.5 minutes into that wasn't there in any of the demos. And Benji actually wrote it in the studio.
It's really great.
It's amazing. And he sent it through, and it was like, oh, hold on. We need space for that now, because the rest of the song hadn't been designed anymore with that in mind, and it was kind of too much straight into it. So we added, after recording, we added, I don't know, 2 or 4 reps of the guitar riff, before the guitar, just to make sure the spacing of everything flowed really well. But that's always the thing. As soon as you do one thing, you have to take consideration, especially with a 12-minute song, that flow of the energy, and coordinating all of those different elements is definitely a big part of what we do and how we write.
But at the same time, we've never limited ourselves musically as to a specific song length or something like that. So if anyone has ideas, all the ideas are listened to, and whether they fit or whatnot. We have enough room to move to basically do whatever we want. I know some other bands may have more of a formula or something, or how they think or how they create music, but for us, we don't really care.
I think that, though, is a big piece of why you've been a successful band, why people continue to follow you after so many years, and why you've developed over all this time as well, is because you are giving what fits your art the priority, as opposed to like a pre-concept of what it should be. Because we've heard that over the years, the band that tries to make their best album again,
Yeah.
Can you do that? I'm not sure that you can. You can get close, but sometimes when you intend too hard, like you said, you guys made all these points that highlight that it can work against your art and what you're trying to express,
Yeah, we don't try and repeat anything we've done. We don't go in with a specific kind of a strategy as to how to write our songs or make them more catchier, or think about how something may appeal to listeners. So it's we all people mature over time, develop, we get influenced by different things, and so with that our music evolves. And I think you should embrace that evolution of every individual in the band, then creating that overall evolution of sound, so to speak. And we also on the restrictions in art, and that's one of the reasons why we did music video, 12.5-minute music video, because we didn't want to necessarily compromise the art, and we don't care.
Well, and it turned out great, though. This is where quality matters. So people often, will roll their eyes at like a very long video or concept or something. However, the difference is very strongly, if it's good, people will be happy to watch it for that. That's how I found myself looking at it. I was like, wow, I actually did not even, to be honest with you guys, I didn't even realize it was 12 minutes till it was over. And I thought that was like a 6-minute song. Like, it didn't even feel like a 12-minute song. So I think that's very important, because some artists do the thing where they do put a preconceived length and then they're trying to fill the 12 minutes. And that's, I think, very different result. You know what I mean? So
yeah, I think that's the best compliment you can have about a longer song. And the quality thing is so important, because my philosophy with songwriting is very much that the longer the song gets, the better it has to be, or else you're going to lose the listener.
That's what I'm saying.
So you get to the 7-minute mark, and it's like, if you want to make it longer, it better be a good song, because as soon as there is a moment of one riff or one section that's not quite as good, like you lose them. And that's where with Equus, like the first 4 minutes obviously go through a bit of a journey with some different things. And then from the 4-minute mark all the way through to the 12.5-minute mark song, where the song finishes, it is the same ongoing flow of energy. Like, there is no pause. It flows in different directions, but it is always ongoing. And it was written like that, like in this one ongoing 8.5-minute stream of thought, in the way that it was written and fine-tuned. And that was one of the discussions with the ending, because one thing that a lot of people haven't really realized, and I brought this up with a couple of people and they're always kind of shocked, but like the last 5 minutes of that song, it's just the same chord progression for 5 minutes. It's just acoustic, and then there's the clean vocals and the string quartet, and then the violin solo. And then the same riff goes heavy, and then there's a guitar solo and the choir, and then the female choir and Xen vocals. Like, so there's a lot of things changed. Like, there's not more than 30 seconds in a row the same. It's always changing and developing, but it's just the same riff for 5 minutes. And like, that's not that easy to make sure
to make interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was a discussion at times. I'm sure that some of the guys brought that up with me at one point of like, is this like getting too long? And it's like, no, it's just as long as everything's exactly where it is. And as long as the mix had to be perfect, or else you're going to lose them, because you're going to get to the 10.5, 11-minute mark and they're going to feel like, oh, hey, this song's pretty long. And as soon as they think that, you just, you lose them. And that's why you do have to suck them in. And with the video, it's the same. You got to draw them in visually, connect that with the music, so they're not noticing the visuals and the music separately. They're just kind of connecting to them both together. And then hopefully just you keep them, if it's good enough, they're just watching, they're absorbed all the way through to the end.
I think with creating a video, it's almost, if you can make it interesting, if you can make a video interesting without the sound, you're already onto a good thing. And so it's like watching, black and white movies or something like that. Old black and white movies, a lot of them, even silent films and whatnot. Like, I grew up watching a lot of silent films, and I love old cinema and that sort of thing. And so, yeah, if you can make anything good without the audio, then adding the audio only makes it that much better.
Wow, I think that's a really good way for people who are listening to kind of, that are maybe learning how to do these things, to conceptualize, making the art, because it is a really visually stunning video which you put together. Who films and edits the videos? Is this in-house production? Are you guys doing this? Are you working with some people to help you achieve those visuals?
No, it was so I would kind of come up with the concept and ideas, basically produce everything, put it together, organize everything myself. And actually got Dave Hunt, who's from his drummer from Australian band called Circles. He does a lot of video and makes his own kind of music videos for bands and that sort of thing. So I wanted to get him on to help me bring this one to life. And so with that one, he edited it as well. So it was based ultimately between Dave and myself that we kind of created that. So it taught me how stressful it was, and why, when you make a video, there's so many different people involved.
Yes.
There's the credits are so long. And for us, it was, just myself and Dave primarily doing everything. And we have something, video coming out soon that we just finished actually creating. So basically the same process. However, in this regard, instead of Dave filming and editing, he's purely filming and I'm editing it for the first time. So
that's gonna be cool.
So that one that Xen's referring to is for the song Graal, which by the time this airs will be out. So if people go check that one out, that's if you like it or don't, the credit or blame all goes to Xen for that one.
Yeah.
We're unfortunately, I'm taking funeral pyre now. So
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah, I mean, to a degree, I have, when you have a specific vision, you don't want, if something goes wrong, you don't necessarily want to blame someone else for that. And you could call it control issues when it comes to creativity, but it's I like to dabble in all sorts of creative fields, and so music videos is one of those things. And I guess jumping in the deep end is a quicker path to learning about things, the mistakes you make, how you can kind of improve on things next time. But I've got Dave there to help with filming and whatever else, so he can tell me whether my ideas aren't possible. So there's a few interesting kind of ideas we kind of stretched out in this one to create certain scenes. So, but I think it's turned out well so far.
Yeah. And just on following up that joke, I make that because I think it's really incredible, and it's been such a wonderful thing for Xen to start exploring that, because not everyone would realize, but all of the band's artwork, all of our band photos, all of our merchandise, it's all done by Xen. So that visual side of the band, every time you see a band photo and a t-shirt design and every album cover and the booklets and everything like that, and pretty much every tour poster and stuff like that as well. So that whole visual side of the band, as well as the lyrical, as well as the vocal, is Xen, and that's where, you know, we do have in this band like some complementary pieces that fit together, because Xen is very visual, whereas, you know, I don't do any of those things that I just listed. I don't do any of them, which is really great, because then there's different things that I'm good at and different things some of the other guys are good at, and then we put those together, and then there's quite a lot of things that somebody in the band is good at, you know, in amongst the entire band.
Right, because you guys are running a really good, successful business as well as a band, and it sounds like you each take on different roles based on your strengths in the business capacity as well, not just in a musical capacity.
Yeah, we've kind of always done that from day one, pretty much. You know, on early internet forums, Tim and myself were, you know, promoting the hell out of the band. We'd get feedback from people saying we're doing too much promotion or we're annoying them or whatever. But, you know, we've kind of seen we've always been quite business minded overall. I mean, Tim's far more business minded than I am, but it's we've always pushed the band in different ways, but always forward for you know, for the sake of the band. And, you know, there's always, you know, that one person you may come across that kind of finds it. And I think with bands these days, especially with online stuff, there needs to, you know, everything's becoming more of a visual focus. And so the first time people may come across you is, say, whether it's a band picture, whether it's an album cover or something like that. And it's unfortunate in a lot of ways where music ultimately comes first, but you still need to grab the attention of all these other people to actually listen to you in the first place. Yeah. And unfortunately, because we're a much more visual world now, people get attracted to pretty things. Yeah. So it's you know, so we don't necessarily cater too much to that, but at the same time, our goal with everything is to try to present the highest quality in everything that we do going forward.
I think you guys
Xen used that word of big picture earlier, and I think that just comes back to that of, you know, what him and I are always thinking, the big picture of every possible different element of what we're doing with the music and the touring and the artwork and the videos and the promotion, and really just all of those different elements, and always keeping that in mind with all of the different things that we do, which I think is, yeah, the reason it kind of works so well in the way we kind of interact with each other with the band, I think.
Now, I want to pivot for a moment. I want to talk about some of the thing you mentioned earlier, circle back around to something you mentioned where you talked about, okay, we're getting ready to go on tour and we're going to be redoing our whole live, you know, going through the gear, going through the rig, through the setup. So, okay, you have these songs with tons and tons of tracks. Are you running tracks live? And how much of a production can you really bring to the United States? Also, as vocalists, have you had a certain listening setup in the past on tour that you like, and is that going to change or stay the same? Some people have surprised me where they won't use in-ears at all and they'll use the stage monitors, but I would think like maybe you guys would need tracks and in-ears. But tell me about what it's like to listen and what you're thinking about for your tour coming up.
Yeah, we all use in-ear monitors live, and one of the things that I found was that, you know, we first started using in-ear monitors, I think it was on the Citadel album cycle. You know, I have like some Ultimate Ears UE7s, which I love. And until I got those, I struggled to sing and play the violin in tune on stage, because everything was just so loud. And if we were just going on the foldback, the frequencies, the way they meld, it's just sometimes hard to tell if you're really in tune, because like there might be these booming bass frequencies from the drums resonating, and they're like just distorting the way that you're hearing things. And so what I noticed as soon as I started using in-ears, you listen back to recording, oh, hey, like I'm in tune now, you know, and it was like, it was literally as simple as that. Because I can hear myself very clearly. I had my own personalized mix. You know, we would have like an app on our phones to be able to adjust the mix ourselves. So we'd be sitting there at sound check, we look like maybe we're all playing on our phones during sound check, but we're all adjusting our in-ears mixes, and they're all personalized for each member. So we're all hearing something different, and we're all hearing a combination of the live, performance that's happening. And a lot of that is then, what soundcheck is about, for us on stage. It's getting our in-ear mix right, because it might feel a little bit different in bigger or smaller rooms. Even when you're using maybe fully molded block out in-ears, there's still a difference, depending on the size of the venue that you're playing. So that's one thing. We do use backing tracks for anything that we can't do live. So for an example, I guess for a song like Equus we were talking about before, there's a lot of extra strings there. And so what we generally work out in advance of the tour will be, okay, what am I playing? Which parts am I actually playing live? And then we'll put the rest of the string parts on a backing track. And then I'll be playing everything else. So there's some bits where if we want the big string section sound, and that's what's on the album, the live, we might keep that string section in the live show, and then I perform live over the top of that, because if you get rid of the string section, all of a sudden it's a totally different sound. It's a solo violin sound. It's not a string section sound. And so it's a completely different tone. Whereas then for a lot of bits, it's simply I'm playing all the solo parts. And then, there's other sections where we get rid of one of the violins, but there's a second violin, viola, cello, and they're on the backing track, and I'm playing the lead violin part live. But then we even have sometimes adjustments like that, depending on if we are able to have any guest musicians, So when we performed, Eerie from Urn on our last album cycle, every now and then we had the opportunity to have an extra violinist play with us. And when we did have that opportunity, we would have a different backing track that deleted the second violin part, so that those were both live, and then just the viola and the cello were on the backing track. So just little things like that. So there's never really anything that's there on the backing track that we're also doing. There's not the drums or guitar or bass or anything like that. It's just for stuff that is important to the song.
Absolutely.
And that without it, all of a sudden, hey, that section's not as good without the string quartet, and because that's how it was written. And that was one of the decisions that we made, especially when I started coming up with ideas for that. There was a discussion within the band, kind of realizing that, hey, if we start using more strings and quartets and stuff like that, the backing tracks become more important, because maybe a section isn't very good. Maybe the main bit might be a string quartet. And if you get rid of it, the song's not as interesting. And so that was kind of a conscious decision, I guess, over the last couple of albums, that we have to make sure that we have that for the live show. So that what people are hearing is the full version of the song, with us playing as many parts as we can for being 6 musicians, and then anything we can't, because maybe there's more than 6 parts, and that's what's on the backing track from there.
Yeah, it's probably a little more expensive to have a quartet on tour with us.
Oh yeah, I mean, I
dream though.
Oh, that would be absolutely epic. That would be gorgeous. I mean, with the stuff you guys have, you could convert it to like an orchestral arrangement if you really wanted to go hard on it. But I'm with you. I'm a click track, backing tracks, in ears. I mean, that's me. Like, I'm that kind of person. So, but every person I interview is very different. So, but I'm with you because for example, in one thing that I do, there's a million different synth sounds, and I'm just like, nah, this is it's ridiculous. We're just going to track it, I really hate rushing songs, I like it to be to the click. I don't want to rush through things. And your guys' music, I imagine, would come, you need it to lay back to some of the more epic sort of tempos and feels that sometimes you have fast things, but sometimes you have things that if it were rushed, it would also ruin it. People don't understand that the tempo is part of the art too. It's not just the tracks, and there's some things you put in your in-ears, like I'm always talking like the song in 8 count, and then it tells people what's coming, and then it keeps the facade of the live show. You don't have to actually talk to each other as much on stage. I think it's a good thing. So
I was probably the last one in the band to get in-ears. I always loved the foldback because I like the feel of the atmosphere, music created, the crowd, everything like that. And so it kind of felt a lot more real to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I could maybe almost connect to it a little bit more. Whereas having in ears for the first time, there was such a disconnect between what I was feeling and the music. And there was such a difference that it took me quite a while to get used to them. But, having in ears, on stage now, all you hear is drums. There's no foldbacks. There's nothing. It's just drums, the sound of the drums.
So you don't use any additional like floor monitors or fills or anything? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
No. And so I ultimately have to have in ears now. So
you have no choice.
I have no choice. Yeah.
Have you guys ever done the thing like every once in a while, like if you tell to the sound guy, like I like the audience feedback, like it depends on who your monitor person is or if you're doing it yourselves, but have you ever done the thing where you actually mic sound crowd noise and put it in your in-ears? Because sometimes I've run into that. Well, they'll actually do that so that you feel more.
Yeah. So that's something that we did look into, and we've done a tiny bit.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to like backtrack slightly and note that
of course
Xen was kind of a little bit peer pressured into getting the in-ears because we were getting rid of all the foldbacks, and it was like, hey Xen, we just need you to get on in-ears, and then we can have like a cleaner sound on stage, and that'll make everything sound a little bit cleaner front of house.
And to be honest, and to be honest, having a click in my ears has helped me get a lot more tighter. Like my timing is the worst in the band. I didn't grow up with a musical background or whatever.
Oh.
So having a click track and everything helps me hear that. And if I can hear the click, then, things are pretty good. But
especially if you're trying to scream over blast beats, like that's hard rhythmically.
Yes.
Especially because a lot of people don't realize, like, instinctively you'll hear the snare louder than the kick. But the snare with most of the blast beats is off the beat. The snare is not on time. It's the kick that is mostly on time, but the kick is not on stage. Like you're not hearing the kick as clearly as you are the snare, which is obviously a very acoustically loud instrument. So, that was one of those things, like when you're trying to learn how to like sing or play in time with that sort of extreme metal drumming, it's like learning that stuff, like, okay, how does that blast beat actually work? What's the thing that's on the beat? Because it's so fast. Your ear can play tricks on you, and you think you're in time, and oh no, I'm actually singing in time with the snare, and the snare's actually the offbeat.
Yeah. And for me, I rely for the most part on feeling when I'm, when you're screaming, whatever, it's you're focusing on that aspect, and those details which Tim are talking about, a lot of the times I might completely miss.
This is a big thing about being a vocalist, and that I, as a teacher, have run into a lot, is teaching people to count, teaching people to, when you don't also play like another instrument, it's very difficult. One of the best students I have with counting is a professional dancer. So, you know what I mean? You can see how that makes it a lot easier because they're counting constantly, I think it's really challenging for vocalists because it's not a natural part of the vocals. It's an additional thing that you have to kind of do on top of it. My last thing I wanted to ask you guys about was, with your tours coming up this year, getting back into live, coming back into it, is there anything that you do routine wise when you're on the road, like food, sleep, warm-ups, etc.? Do you have anything that you do, or do you not do anything? Do you just fly by the seat of your pants?
For us, it's we've learned a lot with touring over the years in terms of, people think that vocalists have the most fun on tours. We don't.
No. It's the worst job if you take it seriously. It's the least fun job.
Because everything, your body is your instrument, and everything you do to your body affects ultimately how it comes out, or, how much sleep you've had, how much water you've had, how much you've spoken to people in a smoke-filled venue afterwards. It's, it all affects what you do. And Tim and I have to be very conscious over the tour as to, we have to do what's best for the tour. And if that means, hiding away in our bunks all day, not being out, then that's what we do. It's we've had a few issues in the past in regards to, your vocal strain and stuff like that. And I think with preparation coming up, it's, kind of, I've over the course of the pandemic, I've managed to get myself, for myself, practice was a little hard because, I live with thin walls and an apartment and get noise complaints and that sort of thing. So, before I might, go out to a rehearsal studio or something to maybe practice properly. And then now I have a kind of a proper vocal booth that I can do regular practice and that sort of thing. So there's a lot more kind of conditioning I can do. And I would like to have a regular routine, which I've got now in terms of practicing, and I have other bands that I record vocals for. So that kind of helps me kind of keep the motivation up for that sort of thing. And, it's our tours are months and months away, but the more comfortable you are, I guess, the less you have to think about stressing on tour about how much thought you have to put into how everything will affect it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. If you start from a stronger baseline, you will not, I agree that you won't be as affected by certain things. But nevertheless, we are putting on a bit of a magic show as vocalists, right? We're not perfect, but we try to give a consistent performance on stage every night. But there's a lot that goes into making that actually happen.
Yeah, I think that there's the two different elements. Like one, like on tour, as Xen was saying, a lot of the time, you have a day off and maybe the guys are going out for a drink or something like that. And, Xen and I are sitting there with our personalized steam machines and herbal tea with, honey or whatever. And that's what we're doing on our day off, where we're getting rest, we're, steaming our voices, we're, drinking herbal tea, where we're not drinking. I don't really drink much anymore in general. And that was actually the opposite of what people think. It's because we started touring so much, and I worked out that I can't drink on tour. As soon as I drink, the next day I don't sing quite as good, and then if I don't have a day off, I can't catch up on that vocal rest, which means that often then for several days my voice is just a little bit under. And so, and it's just that reality of, like Xen said, every single thing you do to your body impacts the quality of your voice. And so you have to do everything that you can. So you have to make sure as best as you can, you're getting rest with your body, but also with your voice, which means that a lot of people, you might turn up in a city and a lot of people want to hang out and they want to say hi. And maybe you haven't been there for, that's one of the things I worry about with this upcoming world tour, that we're not going to have seen certain people for years, especially like there might be fans that really well. Maybe you've met them like 5 times before. Maybe they're a member of our Patreon. And they want to hang out for ages, and you might want to, but you don't know where your voice is going to be on that day. And so it might be that what's best for the show is maybe you can't really talk to anyone that day because you just need complete vocal rest to make sure that you're really able to give the best show possible. But that means making these personal sacrifices in the way that you go about living on the road. And that is just purely only for Xen and I. And the thing is, for me as a violinist, I can be really sick and I can still play pretty good violin, but it's a lot harder to be able to sing at your best when you're unwell. The other thing on that is the preparation. It's totally different practicing at home to being a touring singer. And I remember, you always find out stuff about songs. I remember the first time we toured on the Earn album cycle, this is 2017. We were opening with this song Libera at the start of the show. And like 1 minute into the show is like the most difficult vocal part for me out of any of our songs, because it's this, high continuous part that gets a little bit higher and they're long notes. And it's the start of the show. And the thing is, the very first show we're playing in San Francisco, and I remember I jump out, and for the whole first minute, I'm like jumping around on the stage like crazy. And then I go to sing and I'm puffed. And then I've got to try to hit this bit, which I was practicing a lot at home. And I really struggled. In that first week of the tour to hit that. And I think, pretty quickly I was like, hey, I think we need to change the set list. I think we need to move this song. I'm not in condition enough to be able to do this. But, obviously now further down the line, we've got a lot of experience and we know those sort of things, but it's just not the same. Because, during the show, literally there are parts where I'm jumping around on stage. I might even jump off stage and stage dive, come back on and have to sing. And my heart has to be at a level, my heart rate has to be a level where I can go straight back in and sing exactly like it needs to be and have full control over my breathing. And if I'm not in full control over my breathing, it's not going to sound very good, because I'm going to have to strain and push. And even though I might pull it off, that's going to hurt me for tomorrow's show, because there's going to be that strain in my voice. And when you got maybe 7 shows in a row, if you do that too often, that's when you start to lose your voice and things like that. So just the fact that we won't have done a show in almost 4 years when we go back on the road. And so the thing I've been saying, to myself is, man, I'm going to have to do months of preparation with my voice, so that my voice is in such incredible condition that I can adjust as quickly as possible to that different experience of being on the road. I was even, joking about, oh man, maybe I need to I've got, stairs, out this side of this room. Maybe I need to run up and down the stairs and then sing the part, or literally, how do I prepare
or
for the
sing
first
it
show
while
in
you're
4
running?
years?
I mean, this is not unheard of. When I've interviewed Lauren Hart from Once Human, who is a really, really fit person, right? Also with Australian ties as well.
Yeah.
She was straight up talking about circuit training while doing the set. So this is not
It's actually a
unheard
really
of.
good idea.
It's not a bad idea at all, because like you said, there are certain scenarios that you face live that you cannot replicate, even in a band rehearsal, even at home. It's really hard. I guess you could rent out a whole stage room a couple times and practice in there, jumping up there. But that's maybe a couple times. It costs money. That's not something you have all the time. I mean, it's a completely different thing. And I also find there is a huge difference when the crowd is filling that room versus when you're sound checking or even rehearsing. There's a whole level of noise that's there that wasn't present previously, and that's something you can't replicate either. So, yeah. Well, you guys, this has been a wonderful interview. I can't thank you enough for making time for this interview. And you've got your new album,
for the upcoming
Exul, coming out on March 24th, and North American tour in October. You can already buy tickets for the tour, right?
Absolutely.
And where can people follow you guys to know more about you and your band? neobliviscaris.com.au. Don't forget the AU, because they are lovely Australians. Thank you guys so much for being on the Voice Hacks podcast. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated.
Thanks for having us.
That wraps up this episode of the Voice Hacks podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the show.